We're excited to announce the first ever, first of its kind higher education podcast conference brought to you by Edu Alliance, the EdUp Experience, and Podium. This is happening Saturday, July 12th at the University of Illinois Chicago campus. This is an in-person event, one day only, the first of its kind. This is for people working in and around higher education who are interested in starting a podcast, who may have a podcast, want to learn more about podcasting. So if you want to be there, please go to higheredpodcon.com. That's higheredpodcon.com to learn how you can get your early bird registration, see who the keynote will be, and how you can submit proposals to be a part of this amazing inaugural conference. So that, again, go to higheredpodcon.com to learn more.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. I'm your host, Dr. Jody Blinko, and with me today, I have Gavin Cooney, founder and CEO of Learnocity. So Gavin, let's just jump right in. Why don't we tell these folks what is Learnocity and how did it come to be?
Thanks for having me. So Learnocity is a set of tools that allow other people build out products. Really, I was working in the Department of Education in Australia a number of years ago, and I realized that I was just basically offended by the terrible EdTech that was out there. It just kind of frankly pissed me off.
Yeah.
And I wanted to do something about that. I mean, I think a lot of us have a similar story that we got into education in some way and wanted to kind of save the world a little bit. And that's kind of where I came from and my thinking around it. And I wanted to improve what I thought was terrible standard of EdTech products. And I have a certain set of skills, like Liam Neeson in that movie, and I wanted to use those to try and change the industry as much as humanly possible. And what I did there was we realized that every company was out building the same things over and over again. So they all had to build these building blocks to get anywhere. So imagine you were building a house tomorrow and you have to go quarry for stone. It's just very, very difficult. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to provide that plumbing that could allow somebody build what they wanted to build. So we built these building blocks, you think about them as Lego bricks that you can then use to build whatever product it was, generally around assessments. So, fast forward a number of years, we're delivering a huge amount of assessments. We've got 40 million users. Last year, we delivered 20 billion with a B questions.
Wow.
There's 400 million questions in Learnocity's database belonging to our customers. So we've really achieved scale in this way. And we power other people's products. We power about 150 other products, a bunch of household names that you'd all heard of, College Board and Pearson and Houghton Mifflin and all these names that you will have heard of. But the power behind it is Learnocity, in the same way as, Amazon Web Services is powering half of the internet. Learnocity is powering half of the EdTech industry.
That is absolutely fascinating. And those numbers are staggering. Can we just repeat that one more time? Like help us, repeat those for us so we can really get the scale.
40 million students, 20 billion questions delivered a year, about 400 million questions have been authored. So 400 million questions are delivered 20 billion times to 40 million students right now. And that's in a year.
And connect for me, because you touched on this a little bit. You wanted to solve this problem that you had identified in the industry. You developed Learnocity to do that. And so the problem that you are solving, I know we were talking a little bit before we got started of lessening workload is one, which we haven't gotten into the AI components yet, but help us understand the problem that you set out to solve with Learnocity.
Sure. Well, the original crux of this was that I felt that EdTech was lagging behind every other industry in terms of innovation. If you take a doctor out of a surgery from 100 years ago and you put him in a surgery now, they've no idea what these drugs are, what those machines are, all those methodologies. Everything has massively changed in 100 years. But if you took a teacher from 100 years ago and put them in a classroom today, it's basically chalk and talk. It's the same as when I was a kid. It's the same as when Jesus was a kid, right? So we wanted to kind of modernize that. I felt that EdTech was underserved. I felt like it was not innovating enough. And I wanted to just accelerate the speed of innovation across that industry. And what I kind of realized with that is that, we can, with our innovation, we can make the whole industry rise with the tide of that innovation. So if you go to the Teaching of Mathematics conference, there's like 15 products in there that are powered by us. Nobody knows that. No teacher or student should ever know who we are. But if you're the 16th product, you can either license from us, and we sure love that. We'll take your money all day long. That'd be great. Or you need to build a product every bit as good as what you would have built if you had Learnocity. So now we've brought in things and functionality that's now standard: teacher authoring, auto scoring of mathematics, work solutions being generated by AI, handwriting recognition for math, multiple step math solutions. The list goes on and on and on.
Wow.
So there's a bunch of functionality here that we've brought in, we have made completely standard in the industry. And now we kind of shame the industry into moving forward and getting better. So not only our own customers get better, but everybody else has to get better as a result. And that's that's the impact we're really, really proud of.
Wow. And so just so I'm clear, and maybe if anybody else is wanting clarification on this listening, is it fair to say that it's twofold, or there are two options? We can, if an institution wanted to engage with Learnocity, they would do that through these tools, or develop these tools that they would have access to, or the existing bank of assessments that they could pull from. Am I thinking about that correctly?
Well, it's generally for an institution, they either would buy a product that's already built with Learnocity. We actually have one called Question Mark, which is a kind of end-to-end assessment delivery piece, or a bunch of other things, a bunch of LMSs, a bunch of publishers who have built products on top of Learnocity.
Okay.
And they generally are buying that without ever knowing that we're behind this. They're generally buying products that they just, oh, that's a great product. They didn't know that was built by us, especially in K-12 space. They're just like, anybody you meet, when they see it, then they go on, their kids are doing homework the next day, they kind of recognize some of the functionality. But nobody knows it's us. So they either do that, and generally that's the way for an institution in higher ed to do that. Of course, there are digital first institutions. There are institutions that are essentially EdTech products themselves, right? They don't have a campus and so on. Some of those will have big dev teams and will want to build their own products, and then will engage us directly.
Okay.
But most of the time, they're just kind of buying LMSs or products that have been built on top of Learnocity.
Got it. Okay. Take us more down the path of what we were talking about briefly before we got started. More of the AI is a huge topic right now on everyone's minds. So I know that you had shared that you're doing some really unique and interesting things there. Share with us a little bit more about that.
Sure. So we recognize that, well, AI is massive, right? AI is just changing the world. And really, if you're in any kind of technology and you don't have half your dev team working to disrupt your own product and your own business model, you're going to be the one that's disrupted. So accordingly, we have basically half of our dev team sitting there trying to build stuff that disrupts our own business model, and going after things like, for example, we're working on AI authoring of content. I believe that in 3 years from now, or really 3 days from now, it's kind of crazy to be building content, building questions, building learning materials from scratch without any help of AI. It's like if I wanted you to translate a page of text for me. Like, what you would do as a native French speaker, Spanish speaker, or whatever, is you'd translate it using Google Translate, and then you'd do the edits and see what you need to do. Starting and doing word for word is just kind of crazy. Like, why would you do that?
Nowadays it
Likewise,
is, right? Which is
well,
insane to say, but it's true. Yeah.
insane to it'd be insane to do it. And likewise, you might have a publisher, you might have an institution that has to go and create 50,000 items. In the past, up until a year ago, they had to do that manually. They had to just kind of think these things up and have humans go and create these items, which are hugely expensive to go and do.
Hmm.
Now we can have the same humans armed with AI, and for the same amount of time, they can create 10 times more content. They can create much better content. Every item, every question they write can be a learning opportunity because it can have a worked solution sitting there with it. You can create variations of the same item. You can tag it better. You can add metadata better. And you're creating content, but you're creating it with these tools, and you're way, way more efficient. And so that's the kind of first thing we're working on. I think we
Hmm.
call it author aid. The idea you upload your chapter of your book, and let's say it's 100 pages long, and you ask the tool to create 1,000 questions. And it does that in, half an hour. And then you can go and you can edit those questions. And you might decide that 800 of them were up to standard, or you might decide that you discard some, edit some more, save some others. And it just hugely changes the way that we create content. It's completely disrupting that space. So that's really, really exciting for us.
Yeah.
Second thing we're working on, just such an area of huge problem right now, is that teachers and tutors and lecturers and so on, the higher ed space, are way overworked, probably underpaid, underappreciated, and they're spending hours and hours and hours of their time grading term papers, grading homework, doing assessments. And what happens then is there's a reluctance to assign authentic assessment because of the huge workload there is to
Hmm.
grade long papers and such. So we've come along now with, I think, what we call feedback aid. And this is a tool that allows a teacher or tutor take an essay, take a short answer text, take a project, and around a rubric, will score it and will generate feedback. And this makes that whole process massively, massively quicker with much better feedback. So as before, you might have gotten a 7 out of 10 or a very good. Now you can get a full rubric. You get scores for every attribute. You get paragraphs and paragraphs of really actionable feedback. And it enables then people to assign more authentic feedback, more authentic assessments, and be able to give feedback for that.
Hmm.
Let's assign students videos. Let's assign them project work. Let's get them to create presentations. Let's get them to do speeches on audio. Let's get them to do longer essays. And it takes the burden of that grading off the teacher.
Yeah.
And we're doing this at a cent an essay, beginning at a cent an essay. It's a little bit more than that with longer essays. But the point is, it's completely disrupting the way we're doing it and enabling teaching profession here to be able to assign better homework, assign better assessments, and ultimately increase the student outcomes here.
And I would think too, increasing just the student learning experience. I mean, I think back to some of the feedback that I received when I was writing essays, and it's short and it's all opinion based. And I love what you're saying about the depth of the feedback, I would imagine, that's happening through this process, and then how that's connecting that to actions that would truly create skill development, learning development, competency development. I mean, that's where my mind went of what this would not only lessening the workload, but just the quality and the depth and the value in the feedback that it would provide.
Higher Ed PodCon is coming. Go to higheredpodcon.com. That's higheredpodcon.com to learn more.
And the ability to do better feedback. I mean, or better assessments. I think back to my own education, and places where I learned most was generally around assessment. It was generally, back in the day, back in my college years, go create a website. I went and I learned how to create websites. And, as Seinfeld says, yada, yada, yada. Here we are. We find ourselves having
Mm-hmm.
built an internet company in the EdTech space. And that was around me having an assessment around that space. It's so important. If we want to improve anything, we measure it. That's what we do. If we want to be a better golfer, we count the number of strokes it takes us to get around a golf course. If we want to be fitter or a better runner, we count how long it takes to do a mile or do a 10K or whatever. That's what we do. That's the first place we
Mm-hmm.
start every single time. And it all comes down to that. All the learning outcomes, all that education comes down to assessment. And I think we've a really interesting place here to improve this. And and you look at the overburden of tutors and lecturers. I see myself, my best friend is a lecturer in Ireland, and I see him spending every holiday, like a lot of weekends, a lot of like Easter, like there's an Easter break that he doesn't take, and he sits there for 15 hours a day grading papers. But next year he'll be grading them online, and it'll just grade it
Mm-hmm.
for him. He can then read through, he can confirm a grade. And that's the idea. It's if you think about the name here, it's around feedback aid. It's around one, much better feedback, and two, it's an aid to the human to go and grade that. It doesn't have to replace them. It
Yes.
absolutely shouldn't replace them.
Yes.
It's a good use of AI in that space. A really good case study that will be publishing pretty soon is Penn Foster. Penn Foster seems to be a household brand in the States around kind of distance learning and GEDs and so on. They implemented this, and they did a kind of full control group and so on. And the number of students who drop out of the GED program is astonishing. Their completion rates
Mm-hmm.
are quite low relative. You got a quite disadvantaged population and so on who are doing these things. But they were able to double the completion rates of a GED by giving better feedback and more timely feedback using this tool.
Wow.
It's astonishing. I'm just like, I'm thrilled at this. It goes back to why we're doing this. Really back to the mission of Learnocity and trying to create better EdTech products. I'm so thrilled at this idea that like possibly tens of thousands of students will get their next few years because of the tech we've built and provided
Mm-hmm.
to these guys. Like that's such a thrill to realize that we're part of that.
Yeah.
And it's just around giving better assessment, giving better feedback in a more timely way. I mean, it's so simple, and it's right there. We've built the building blocks for this, and we've also built it around short answer text and project work and so on as well.
And so the feedback aid is obviously live and out there. You talk about the case study. And is that a product that can be engaged with? Just look up feedback aid, or what would be the way to
look up
engage with that?
Learnocity. It's right there. If you look up at learnocity.com, and then it can be plugged into anything. So it can be plugged into whatever LMS you're using already. It can be plugged into whatever scoring mechanism you're using for higher stakes exams or
Wow.
whatever. And what we did was we did a bunch of studies. We got about 50,000 previously done and previously professionally graded essays. We're adding to that database all the time. And what we do then is we compare how good feedback aid is compared to a human and how it aligns.
Mm-hmm.
And it's astonishing. It's a phenomenal thing. It's like AI is just basically as good at grading as, say, Jody, you and I both get a job grading exams for a College Board or exams for some awarding body.
Yeah.
What we do is they'd get maybe 500 papers, and you and I would both grade them, and then they'd measure how aligned your and my grade is. And there's a kind of a way of calculating that. It's called a quadratic weighted kappa, a quick score, QWK. And if you and I are really good at this, we're probably going to get a 0.8 of a quick score.
Okay.
Well, and we'll probably maybe get retrained if we got a 0.6 or something like that. This AI is getting 0.8 and above. So it's as good as a human. And where we're finding the differences, sometimes you go in and go, oh my God, we graded this 0 and the human graded it 75%. and you go in and realize that the response in question was complete gibberish, and the human didn't pick it up, or completely off topic. It may be a valid response that was in good English or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
but completely off topic. And sometimes, tired, overworked humans mightn't pick up on that, but the AI does. So it can be
Wow.
better than humans, and it's just like astonishing to look at the numbers and see where that is.
So I'm sure you touched in the what you were just sharing. You talked a little bit about the just the quality of the assessment, which I know is on a lot of people's minds when they think about AI. Is the integrity of the process, the data, the quality of the feedback, and I think you absolutely just address that with that example, but when you think about higher ed in general, and if I'm a provost or a president or an executive leader at an institution who's thinking about these things, but I'm still questioning or on the fence or not sure if it's the right next step or path to go down, what would be insight or thoughts that you would have to offer for someone who's maybe struggling with that?
Look, I mean, I think a lot of industries, education being at the forefront of them, are going to be disrupted over the next number of years. It's all
Mm-hmm.
changing. Somebody is moving our cheese, and we have to live with that. And there's no way to create the future you want just by banning the things you don't want. It's
Mm.
kind of, like Shawshank Redemption, get busy living or get busy dying. I think we
Yeah.
have to roll with this punch, and we have to change the way we're doing things. So advice I'd have to those out there is you're gonna have to realize this, and you're gonna have to experiment with what works and what doesn't work. There's gonna be a lot of false starts. There's gonna be a lot of interesting work that's done and doesn't amount to stuff. But really, things are changing. The way students are learning is changing. The way the assessment is going to happen is changing, and we want to be on the right side of history on this. We want to be the ones who are not disrupted, but by this whole thing, because everything is going to change. There's no doubt of that.
Yeah. And when you think about higher ed, I know you said, if these aren't your words of wisdom, not to spoil the last question of our conversation, but when you said earlier, if you don't spend time disrupting your own business model, someone else will. In that same spirit, when you think about just the disruption of higher education and you look 3, 4, 5 years down the line, what do you see?
Look, I mean, there's no future here where we can sit this out. We can sit out the change that's coming. It's inevitable, and our roles here is to make it good. So what do I see? I see an extraordinary difference in the way people are learning right now. An extraordinary difference between the way I work right now. I don't use Google as much. I use ChatGPT to answer the questions. It's kind of quicker. It generates a bunch of things for me. Um, and it doesn't matter. Does it matter if I write you an email tomorrow and it happens to be AI generated, or if I did a proposal for you was AI generated? As long as I know every single word of it, as long as it's good,
Mm-hmm.
as long as I can stand behind it, and I've slaved over it. That's what matters. What matters is the output and the ownership of that. So trying to deny that is going to be a problem, right? You're going to realize pretty quickly that it's all changing. People are learning a lot differently. The way they work is going to be a lot different. And, it's like banning a calculator in math education right now. It just seems pointless. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think we need appropriate uses of AI in assessments and in student work. And I think then what it leads to is more autonomy in how people are learning, and ultimately, we all thought that I mean, when the internet came along, people thought that maybe you wouldn't need to learn stuff. Of course you do. It's how you apply it. And it
Right.
seems like the whole population got stupider and not more clever, but that's a different rant for a different day. But I think people are gonna have this information right at their fingertips all of the time. And I think the way people learn is a lot different. And I think it takes an uneducated person to think that education doesn't matter. I think it matters. It matters more than ever, but it matters slightly differently, and we need to kind of adapt in that way. And we need people to come out of their education system, being able to critically think, being able to use the tools that are out there. They're going to be using on a day-to-day basis, and I think we need a different student output from the education system than was there before. Like, the Irish education system, for example. And the Irish education system was built basically by the Catholic Church 100 years ago to churn out very well-rounded priests, basically, right? That's what they wanted to do, was very kind of well-read, well-rounded, well-educated people. And that's been a fantastic education system. But as that changes, you need more analytical people who can do computer science and can do this sort of stuff. We need to evolve the kind of students that come out of an education system, because the world we're coming into is completely changing. They're not going to factories in the US anymore. They're doing something else, right? There's more knowledge workers and whatever the next generation of that is.
Yeah. And this question may be completely irrelevant, but it's on my mind, so I'm going to throw it out there because we're talking about the global impact here. Do you see any difference in how Learnocity is used globally, depending on the country?
It's funny, you have different countries who have more innovation going on, but I mean, I think sometimes that's just, I'm whoever I'm speaking to in a particular country. Australia, for example, it seems to be the best people who are the more innovative people who are kind of moving forward there. But the best American company is certainly equal to that. I always found that I could get higher level meetings internationally because, for say in Australia, I'd go into, even when we're an itty bitty small company, I'd turn up at a Department of Education in Australia and there'd be like 17 people there to meet me because they hadn't had a sales call. Like, nobody called to them, whereas if you're in New York, you're getting people knocking your door every
all
day.
day long. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So I found some very innovative people along the way who were just very keen to do stuff along the way. We certainly see that. You see, obviously, some third world scenarios there as well, but you also then kind of see the one-to-one devices as well in some places. So, the demographic changes vary internationally as much as they do in the US. So it's but it is, I think the US are leading from the front on this for the most part.
Is there anything, Gavin, that we haven't talked about yet related to Learnocity that you think is important to share or for folks to know who are listening?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's more around the AI pieces that we haven't really talked about. Talked about the ability to take large item banks of content and be able to transform them for your own needs. So let's have if you have 100,000 items sitting in an item bank and you need to kind of check them for DEI, and maybe need to transform them because there's different DEI rules coming through. That's another thing that we're working on at the moment. Just brought out in a product called the Item Bank Health Check. Kind of broadly covers it. I mean, accessibility is a massive, massive issue. There's more and more court cases on this, and it's something we spend a long time doing to make sure that the product is accessible to every student. It's just so important. But it kind of is the broad overview, as much as you can do in 20 minutes. That's the broad overview of what we're at.
Yeah. And what was the name of that product around the accessibility that you were just talking about?
Well, it's generally we have accessibility built into everything, right? So
okay.
every single product has to have accessibility built in. So we spend a huge amount of our time making sure that, a blind student using a screen reader or a dyslexic student who needs a certain color background or different font, or a shorter sight student who needs larger text. All these things need to be adaptable in the interface, and it's a lot easier for an institution or for a product owner to build that in once and then be able to toggle on these things and say, make it green with a red background for whatever niche use case. So building that in from the ground up is hugely, hugely important.
Okay. Well, then I'm going to ask you the final question to share with folks. I always like to end these conversations by asking any words of wisdom. Doesn't have to be related to higher ed, but just any words of wisdom that you've learned from along your journey and your experiences that you would want to share with everyone listening.
Look, it's a hard question. I've kind of touched on some of the words of wisdom already when it came to disrupting your own business. But look, I think the future is here. It's just unevenly distributed. And I think, particularly to this audience, it's imperative for everyone to be out there looking at the new ways that students are learning, and as a result, looking at how they should be assessed and how they should be taught. So, I think there's a bunch there, a bunch of advice centered around that I think the audience here should be listening to and should be focused on.
Well, thank you for your time today. Thank you for your contribution to higher education and all the work that you're doing. I really enjoyed learning more about Learnocity, and more specifically, the part that you shared around the feedback aid and just the depth of not only the impact to the experience for the tutor, the lecturer, but also the impact to the experience for the learner and what that can really do. I think, the case study that you shared about the doubling of the GED passing rates because of the quality of the feedback. I mean, when you think about purpose and mission and, like you said, the impact that you're making into the space, that's absolutely phenomenal. So thank you again for the time today, which I know it's evening for you, but thank you for the time this afternoon, Gavin. And everyone, thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode of the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. I'm your host, Dr. Jody Blinko. Our guest today, Gavin Cooney, founder and CEO of Learnocity. Thank you, and we will see you all again soon.
Did you buy your tickets yet? Higher Education's first podcast conference is coming July 12th. Go to higheredpodcon.com, higheredpodcon.com. Get your tickets.